Good evening, my little phantoms. Welcome back to Phantasmic. I'm Lady Macabre, your hostess for the night, and for this episode I'll be reading 5 stories instead of just 3. This is intended to be a very lighthearted episode, so drink some water, sit back, and have some fun as I tell you some scary stories. Our first story comes from Reader's Digest, from a list of 12 short, scary stories that they shared themselves. This one is called The Little Hands. I've never lived in a haunted house, but my mother did as a teen, writes Reddit user Patented Space Hook, recounting a true event. Other houses on her street had strange things going on too. A few homes away from her lived a family. One night, the daughter went to bed with a bad headache. The next day, she was dead. She'd passed away from an aneurysm. After her funeral, the family went away to get their minds off the tragedy, and the father asked my uncle, my mom's brother, to check on their pets. My mom and dad, who were dating at the time, went with him. My mother had heard that there was a grand piano and she wanted to play it. My dad was studying to be a veterinarian. After entering the house, my uncle and my father headed to the basement to see the animals, and my mother went to the piano on the ground floor. She was playing it when she felt something brush her ankles. She thought a cat must have left the basement and walked past her. She kept playing, and then she felt it again. She looked under the piano and saw nothing. When she started again, she felt hands clasp her legs tightly. She dashed to the basement door, called my uncle and father, and waited for them. Back outside, my uncle could tell my mom was rattled and asked what was wrong. She told him what had happened, and he turned white. He told her the daughter who had died used to play a game with her father. When he played the piano, she'd crawl underneath, grab his ankles, and push his feet up and down on the pedals. You know, while some ghosts just want to make themselves known, there are some who enjoy playing tricks on people or playing games with them. This would seem to be one of those ghosts, but at least in this one, it was intended to be a game. And to be honest with you all, I found it a bit heartwarming that the ghost of the daughter was still trying to play those little piano games. Maybe that's just me. Regardless, our next story for the night was recommended to me by someone who wanted to stay anonymous. This story is called The Black Cat's Message and can be found on AmericanFolklore.net. I came home late one night after work and found my wife Ethel puttering about the kitchen with a big yellow cat at her heels. "Who is this?" I asked jovially. "This is our new cat," said Ethel, giving me a hug and a kiss to welcome me home. "She just appeared at the kitchen door and wanted to come in. None of the neighbors know where she came from, so I guess she's ours. It'll be nice to have some company around the house." I bent down and scratched the yellow cat under the chin. She purred and stretched. "Well, I think our income can stretch far enough to feed 3, I said. My son had taken over my job at the Mercantile, and my wife and I were enjoying leisurely old age. I like to keep busy though, and so I spent a few hours every day cutting and hauling wood to be used at the mill. I went out to milk the cow, and when I came back in, Ethel gave the cat some cream in a saucer. We sat on the porch after dinner, and the cat sat with us. "You are a very nice kitty," I said to her. She purred loudly. "Donald," Ethel said. She sounded worried. I turned to look at her. The neighbors acted rather oddly when I told them about the cat. They seem to think she's a ghost or a witch of some sort transformed into a cat. They told me to get rid of her. "A witch?" I asked and laughed heartily. "Are you a witch, little cat?" The cat yawned and stretched. Reluctantly, Ethel started to laugh with me. It seemed such a ludicrous notion. We sat watching the beautiful sunset and then took ourselves to bed. The cat quickly became an essential part of our household. She would purr us awake each morning and would beg for cream when I brought in the morning's milking. She followed Ethel around supervising her work during the day and would sit by the fire at night while we read aloud. The days became shorter as autumn approached, and often I would work until early sunset, cutting and hauling wood. One night in October, I didn't finish hauling my last load until dusk. As soon as I had piled the last log, I started down the road, hoping to get home before dark, since I had not brought a lantern with me. I rounded a corner and saw a group of black cats standing in the middle of the road. They were nearly invisible in the growing dark. As I drew nearer, I saw that they were carrying a stretcher between them. I stopped and rubbed my eyes. That wasn't possible. When I looked again, the stretcher was still there, and there was a little dead cat laying on it. I was astonished. It must be a trick of the light, I thought. Then one of the cats called out, "Sir, please tell Aunt Can that Polly Grundy is dead." My mouth dropped in shock. I shook my head hard, not believing my ears. How ridiculous, I thought. Cats don't talk. I hurried past the little group, carefully looking the other way. I must be working too hard, I thought, but I couldn't help wondering who Aunt Can may be. And why did the cat want me to tell her Polly Grundy was dead? Was Polly Grundy the cat on the stretcher? Suddenly, I was confronted by a small black cat. It was standing directly in front of me. I stopped and looked down at it. It looked back at me with large green eyes that seemed to glow in the fading light. "I have a message for Aunt Can," the cat said. "Tell her that Polly Grundy is dead." The cat stalked past me and went to join the other cats grouped around the stretcher. I was completely nonplussed. This was getting very spooky. Talking cats and a dead Polly Grundy. And who was Aunt Can? I hurried away fast as I could walk. Around me, the woods were getting darker and darker. I did not want to stay in that wood with the group of talking cats. Not that I believed that the cats had actually spoken. It was all a strange, waking dream brought on by too much work. Behind me, the cats gave a strange shriek and called out all together, "Old man, tell Aunt Can that Polly Grundy is dead." I'd had enough. I sprinted for home as fast as I could go, and didn't stop until I had reached the safety of my porch. I paused to catch my breath. I did not want to explain to Ethel that I was seeing and hearing impossible things. She would dose me with castor oil and call the doctor. When I was sufficiently composed, I went into the house and tried to act normally. I should have known it wouldn't work. Ethel and I had been married for 30 years, and she knew me inside and out. She didn't say anything until after I'd finished the chores. Then she sat me down in front of the fire and brought me my supper. After I'd take a few bites and started to relax, she said, "Tell me about it, Donald." "I don't want to worry you," I said, reluctant to talk about what I had seen and heard on the way home. The yellow cat was lying by the fire. She looked up when she heard my voice and came to sit by my chair. I offered her a morsel of food, which she accepted daintily. "I'll worry more if you don't tell me," said Ethel. "I think maybe something is wrong with my brain," I said slowly. While I was walking home, I thought I saw a group of black cats carrying a stretcher with a dead cat on it. Then I thought I heard the cats talking to me. They asked me to tell Aunt Can that Polly Grundy was dead. The yellow cat leapt up onto the windowsill. "Polly Grundy is dead?" she cried. "Then I am the queen of the witches!" She switched her tail and the window flew open with a bang. The yellow cat leapt through and disappeared into the night, never to return. Ethel had to dump an entire bucket of water on my head to revive me from my faint. "The good news," she told me when I sat up, dripping and swearing because the water was ice cold, "is that you have nothing wrong with your brain. The bad news is that our cat has just left us to become the queen of the witches. We'll have to get another cat." "Oh no," I said immediately. "I have had enough of cats." We got a dog. It has long been believed that witches can take on the form of their animal familiar, and the thought of one living discreetly yet contently as an average house cat certainly is an intriguing one. Imagine living with the queen of the witches, but being none the wiser because she chose to hide among your family as a cat. I'm not sure I'd faint after an experience like that, personally, but then again, I'm not really looking to find out anytime soon. Thanks for sharing, though, my anonymous little phantom. Now that does bring us to our next story. I'm sure you're all familiar with Hello Kitty, considering that one Avril Lavigne song is such a bop down in hell. You know, the one that goes, "Come, come, kitty, kitty, you're so pretty, pretty. Don't go, kitty, kitty, stay with me." And yes, I did just sing that in order to avoid copyright, I'm sorry. But for those who have no clue what I'm talking about, according to Encyclopedia Britannica, Hello Kitty was created in 1974 by Sanrio. Their main mascot was named Kitty White, but her name may as well be Hello Kitty with how prominently the branding features her. She is a small, round-faced, cartoon cat-like girl with black eyes, a yellow nose, no mouth, and a red bow perched on her left ear, quote end quote. But have you ever wondered why she has no mouth? Well, if you aren't at least wondering now, oh well, I'm sharing anyway. You see, the woman who came up with Hello Kitty has a daughter. Her daughter developed a rare form of cancer in her mouth, and every doctor they tried told the mother that there was nothing they could do. Her daughter was going to die. The mother was, understandably, inconsolable. Her daughter was her only baby, and she couldn't imagine living the rest of her life without her. After all, a mother should never have to bury her own child. Her daughter was supposed to outlive her. She vowed to do whatever she could to save her daughter, to see to it that she had a future. When her daughter was just hours from death, the desperate mother received a visit. It was the middle of night, and she had been begging for a miracle when the devil himself appeared in the hospital room before her. He told her he would save her little baby girl, on the condition that she promised to invent a cartoon character that would end up in every home across the globe. The mother was suspicious. Why would the devil request that she create what she could only assume to be a beloved cartoon character? She certainly couldn't think of any other way to get into the homes of everyone. But of course, the devil's intent was never to bring joy to the hearts of many. When asked, he said he would use the character to hypnotize children and possess them to do his bidding. The mother was torn. Should she save her own child and sacrifice all those innocent souls out there? Well, as anyone knows, a mother's love for her child is intense. It was because of her intense love for her daughter that the mother agreed, albeit reluctantly. Her daughter made a full recovery within the week, and in return, the mother invented Kitty White, later to be known as Hello Kitty. As an homage to her precious child, however, she designed the character with no mouth because her daughter's mouth was eaten away by the cancer and had to be sewn up. This story isn't actually the case, of course, but that's not what this podcast is about, so I'll just leave it at that spooky little tale. I'm not sure where I originally heard this one, but I'm glad I remembered it. I did embellish a bit, I admit, but the base version I was able to find is linked in the description. A mother's love truly knows no bounds. And this story highlights the terrible things one will do for her children. But we have more stories to read tonight, darling, so I must move on to our next. Submitted once again by Uber Terminator, my friend on Discord, our next story is from creepypasta.com and is simply called Ability. You'll want to pay attention to this one. There's a bit of a twist. I live in Osaka, Japan, and often use the subway to go to work in the morning. One day, when I was waiting for the train, I noticed a homeless man standing in a corner of the subway station, muttering to himself as people passed by. He was holding out a cup and seemed to be begging for spare change. A fat woman passed by the homeless man, and I distinctly heard him say pig. Wow, I thought to myself. This homeless man is insulting people and he still expects them to give him money? Then a tall businessman went by and the homeless guy muttered, "Human." Human? Well, I can't argue with that. Obviously he was human. The next day, I arrived early at the subway station and had some time to kill, so I decided to stand close to the homeless man and listen to his strange mutterings. A thin, haggard-looking man passed in front of him, and I heard the homeless guy mutter, "Cow." Cow, I thought. The man was much too skinny to be a cow. He looked more like a turkey or chicken to me. A minute or so later, a fat man went by, and the homeless man said, "Potato." Potato? I was under the impression he called fat people pig. That day at work, I couldn't stop thinking about the homeless man and his puzzling behavior. I kept trying to find some logic or pattern in what he was muttering. Perhaps he has some kind of psychic ability, I thought. Maybe he knows what these people were in a previous life. In Japan, many people believe in reincarnation. I observed the homeless man many times and began to think that my theory was right. I often heard him calling people things like rabbit, or onion, or sheep, or even tomato. One day, curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to ask him what was going on. As I walked up to him, he looked up at me and said, "Bread." I tossed some money into his cup and asked him if he had some kind of psychic ability. The homeless man smiled and said, "Yes, indeed. I do have a psychic ability. It is an ability that I obtained years ago, but it is not what you might expect. I can't tell the future or read minds or anything like that." "Then what is your ability?" I asked eagerly. "The ability is merely knowing the last thing somebody ate," he said. I laughed because I realized he was right. He said bread. The last thing I had eaten for breakfast that day was toast. I walked away shaking my head. Of all the psychic abilities someone could have, that one must be the most useless. Now, I'm not going to point anything out. If you caught it, you caught it. But I must admit, when I first read the story, the twist got a little amused chuckle out of me. Thank you for sharing this one. It's been a while since a scary story managed to make me laugh to any extent. I'm just glad that this was in the good way. I hope the rest of you enjoyed that one as much as I did. But that does bring us to our final story. This one may just be the shortest scary story I've ever read, but it's simultaneously the scariest yet funniest I'll be sharing tonight. Boo! Okay, alright, all jokes aside, our final story for tonight is actually going to be pretty short. It's from r/short scary stories over on Reddit and was penned by the user RealScience87. My daughter learned to count. My daughter woke me around 11:50 last night. My wife and I had picked her up from her friend Sally's birthday party, brought her home, and put her to bed. My wife went into the bedroom to read while I fell asleep watching the Braves game. "Daddy," she whispered, tugging my shirt sleeve. "Guess how old I'm gonna be next month?" "I don't know, Beauty," I said as I slipped on my glasses. "How old?" She smiled and held up 4 fingers. "It's 7:30 now. My wife and I have been up with her for almost 8 hours. She still refuses to tell us where she got them." If I were a parent and that happened to me, I have no clue how I'd respond to a situation like that. Children can be terrifying little things. I certainly hope I don't have to bear any anytime soon. Excuse me, I'm getting a bit sidetracked. With that incredibly short yet effective story, we have reached the end of tonight's episode. My dear little phantoms, I do hope that you've been thoroughly entertained. If you have, and you want to support this show financially, you can do so through Patreon, Ko-fi, or OnlyFans. Thank you so much for listening in this week. Remember, once we get 500 of you little phantoms, I'll be sharing one of my very own scary stories. So be sure to subscribe, follow, whatever it is that the platform you're tuning in on lets you do so you don't miss out. And don't worry, I won't point out the person lurking behind you this time. I want you to be able to get plenty of water and rest, so be sure you take care of yourself. Good night. Mwah.